Hello everyone and welcome to a new edition of The World Today. Today is Thursday, 15th of December. Ladies and gentlemen, we kick off today's episode and we have with us Mr. Rauf Jaffar, an economic analyst. A very good afternoon, sir, and it's a pleasure to have you with us here in Nile TV. So today we'll be discussing the current situation in Egypt and some other countries, and we start off with Al-Ahram Online, where the headline reads, Egyptian authorities execute Sinai militant Adel Habbara. Egyptian prison authorities executed Thursday morning Adel Habbara, a Sinai militant who was convicted of murder in relation with terrorist attacks that killed dozens of Egypt's security personnel. On Wednesday evening, Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, ratified Habbara's death according to the law. Habbara was handed final death sentences in 2 cases for his involvement in terrorist attacks against Egyptian security personnel. On Monday, Egypt's court upheld the second death sentence against Habbara for killing a police detective in El Sharqiya government in 2012. Sir, what would be the echo of executing the terrorist Habbara in the Egyptian street?
Well, people will be very happy. I don't expect any echoes as far as the militants or terrorists are concerned, but this was a long-awaited decision and a long-awaited execution, and I think most of the Egyptians will be happy to have this thing done, and I hope it marks the beginning of a series of well-deserved executions for the terrorists who were, of course, the reason for a lot of unfortunate accidents that happened all over Egypt.
So, mentioning the accidents that took place, of course, the horrifying accident that took place last Sunday on the day of Prophet Muhammad's birth, may peace be upon him, when we were supposed to be celebrating, and the Christians were going all over because it was a public holiday to churches to visit and do their rituals. Unfortunately, this terrorist attack took place, and Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, Ahmed al-Tayyib, visited the Coptic Orthodox Church. How far would this visit reflect Al-Azhar's solidarity with Coptic churches?
Well, in Egypt, I mean, Muslims and Copts, there was never a difference between both. And we are Egyptians to start with and to end with. And this was a very, nice, amicable visit and expected, just to prove to everybody that there is absolutely no difference between a Muslim Egyptian or a Coptic Egyptian. We're both Egyptians, and
that Egyptian unity.
Of course, solidarity, unity. These are the Egyptians. I mean, all through the years.
Sir, the Cairo Post reads, Cairo conference on Libya concludes with 5 proposals to end the crisis. And Egypt's government concluded on Wednesday a conference with Libyan officials and representatives from the country's numerous factions, issuing a principles and 5 proposed amendments to an agreement brokered by the UN in 2015, which aimed to create a unity government in war-torn North African state. Egypt's Foreign Minister Sameh Shokri and Army Chief of Staff Mahmoud Higazi attended the 2-day conference in Cairo, along with a range of Libyan representatives. Sir, in relation to this piece of information I just read, how do you evaluate Egypt's efforts to stabilize the war-torn state?
It's a very valued effort, and Egypt is the first neighbor. And we consider that the stability of Libya is very much the stability of Egypt. And so our involvement was expected and is very, very normal. And I think that this conference was successful, or marked the beginning of hopefully some successful steps to follow in order to achieve as much stability as possible in Libya, hopefully.
Sir, how do you read the latest developments in Libya nowadays?
I think things are moving slowly, but to the better. And as maybe we said before, the less foreign involvement in solving the Libyan problem, the better. And it's up to the Libyans themselves to sit together without, I mean, neighbors, fair enough, but foreigners, I personally would not recommend. But they are starting to understand that they have to work things out within themselves, and the solution has to come from inside. So I think they are doing well, and I understand they will meet again in a couple of weeks to assess what has happened and maybe to talk further rapprochement between the different parties there.
Sir, how do you see the Egyptian stance towards Syria and Egypt's stance from Syria and the certain happenings that are taking place nowadays in under the latest developments?
Well, Syria particularly, our president was very clear. He said, we are always backing the legitimate administration. So, and again, like Libya, Syria's problem is better solved by the Syrians themselves. And the dilemma that is happening in Syria is exactly because a lot of foreign interferences have been going on, and this is not for the better of the Syrian people. But Egypt was very firm in backing the legitimate government.
Sir, how did Libya turn to a regional, has Libya turned to be a regional threat?
Well, any instability reflects on the neighboring areas. And of course, when Libya is not well, Egypt is not well, and Tunisia is not well. So that's why we always push towards the stability of Libya. But so far, it has been, of course, within Libya, the situation is not that bad, but so far it has not represented a threat to the region. But if we leave things without solution, it might very well represent a threat.
How do you evaluate international efforts and to fight terrorism in Libya, and of course international efforts to fight terrorism worldwide?
In Libya and world, I don't think they are serious to start with. I mean, it's a matter
international
of
efforts are
yes,
not
yes,
serious?
they are not serious. Maybe the United Nations, they are looking into peace and stability. But foreign forces, they all look at their own interest. And I think that their role will not help a lot, as much as the role of the Libyans themselves and of the neighboring countries. So we should not count a lot on the international involvement and intervention. Rather, we should count on the Libyans working things out between themselves and on the neighboring countries, because it is their interest, of course, to have a stable Libya.
So we move on to The Guardian, where it reads, Kiri calls for national dialogue to end South Sudan war. President Salva Kiir called Wednesday for a national dialogue to end the 3-year-long civil war in South Sudan. In a speech to Parliament, Kiri, who was wrangling for power with his former deputy Riek Machar, plunged the world's newest nation into a brutal, destructive and ongoing civil war in December 2013, said the dialogue would consolidate peace in South Sudan. Kiri said a panel of personalities and people of consensus would guide the national dialogue, which will involve all the people of South Sudan, but did not say who the panel members would be. Sir, how do you describe South Sudan's crisis?
Well, you have to understand the geopolitical situation in South Sudan. South Sudan, unfortunately, it has more than maybe 40 different ethnic groups and another same number maybe of languages and religions and cults and what have you. So it is very, very difficult to have all these sit down and work something out. The situation that was agreed upon was that three major tribes were represented. One of them had the president, and the two others, they had the vice president. But apparently this formula, it never worked out. It never worked out. So I don't really have an opinion, but I can think of maybe a federal government where authority and presidency is to be sort of shared between the different tribes on rotary basis or something of the sort. But unfortunately, the south of Sudan will face a lot of internal problems for some years to come.
Sir, is South Sudan back to war again?
They are always in war.
They're always in war.
They are always in war as long as the tribes are not, any tribe that is not happy goes to war with another tribe. So having so many, this is bound to happen, and unless they find a solution between themselves, unfortunately...
How can they find a solution, sir?
As I said, they maybe form a big council having as members 10, 15, 20 of the head of tribes, and this council maybe can rule the south of Sudan, and maybe the authority or the presidency of the country is to be rotating between something like Switzerland, for instance, or something like that. But as long as you have so many different ethnic groups, so many different tribes, so many different religions, it would be very, very difficult to have one rule them all. They have to sort of distribute the power between themselves.
Sir, is President Salva Kiir and rebel leader Riek Machar aware of the suffering that the people are going through?
I'm sure. Of course, President Kiir represents the biggest tribe, and Machar was representing the second biggest. One was the president, the other was his vice, and they tried to work things out maybe for a year or so, and then immediately conflict started, and the vice president was not, and his tribe was not happy with what Salva Kiir was doing, so they started fighting, and this will keep on going until some sort of solution can be found, unfortunately.
What is the impact of this war in South Sudan on the neighboring states or countries, sir?
It's exactly like we said about Libya. When there is a place who is not stable, of course it reflects on the neighboring countries. And people starting to flee, migrants starting to go to other countries, it represents an unease to all neighboring countries. So,
sir, is there any possibility that peace can overwhelm in the country in South Sudan?
Eventually, yes, but it will take some time and a lot of effort.
And from The Guardian, we move on to the Gulf today, ladies and gentlemen, where the headline reads, Aleppo fights nears end, says the army. The Syrian army and its allies could declare victory at any moment, the source said, predicting that the final fall of rebel enclave on Tuesday or Wednesday after insurgent defenses collapsed on Monday. Turkish and Russian officials will meet on Wednesday to examine a possible ceasefire and opening a corridor, a senior Turkish official reported, who declined to be identified. But Moscow, the Syrian government's most powerful ally, rejected any immediate call for a ceasefire. The Russian side wants to do that only when the corridors are established, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said on Tuesday. Sir, how do you describe the latest Syrian developments? And this was my question at the start of our episode.
Well, Aleppo is almost liberated or free.
Do you think, sir, that Bashar al-Assad is actually going to regain again Aleppo?
I mean, it's almost over. There's maybe the rebels, maybe the opposition is what maybe they have 2, 3, 4 square kilometers. This is all what is left for them in Aleppo to the east, and I think it's only a matter of hours before they are out. And it was only very natural that the Russians will never accept a ceasefire as long as they are gaining grounds by the hour. So Aleppo will be unified very, very, very soon. It's a matter of hours, and hopefully this will give the possibility to the administration, to President
Bashar
al-Assad, with some rational opposition to sit down and talk the future of Syria.
Do you think that President Bashar al-Assad is going to gain again Syria as a country and be and be in full control, and the war in this country is going to be overcome, and they're going to start living normal lives like every other country?
Yes, but the way I see it, it might not be full Syria as we knew it. It might
Do you
be,
think it's going to be divided, sir?
Unfortunately, this is what I can see.
Divided into what?
Probably into three different countries. Hopefully, I mean, I wish this never happens, but from what everybody can see, it is moving into this direction. But again, it is up to the Syrians to decide whether they want to have one or more country, again headed by Bashar or other. But I don't see it that way. Unfortunately, it is sad to say, but this is what it is.
Sir, do you think that U.S.-elect Donald Trump, as a new president of the United States that's taking office on the 20th of January, is a reason, one of the reasons behind the power gained in Syria by President Bashar al-Assad?
Well, President-elect...
the change in administration in the United States backed him up.
He mentioned it, he said repeatedly, I'm talking about President-elect Trump, that he wants to concentrate America itself on the United States from the inside, and he wants to sort of not pull out, but at least decrease the involvement of the United States abroad. And he made it very clear, and I'm sure that this was one of the reasons Russians with President Bashar are gaining grounds and are getting into a better position. And I'm sure, again, that once Mr. Trump is in office, the Syrian situation will be resolved rather quickly.
Sir, quickly before we wrap up today's episode, how do you foresee the future of the United States under the presidency of U.S.-elect Donald Trump?
Personally, I am very optimistic for the American people. I was always, I had a belief that Trump was going to win against all odds, but I believe that. And I think for the American people, he will make an excellent president, inside and outside.
And for the Arab region, sir?
The situation being that bad, it can only get better. But no, he will be a reasonable man, and he will do good for the United States inside and outside, including the Middle East, of course.
Mr. Rauf Jaffar, an economic analyst, we thank you so much, sir, for your in-depth analysis of all the news that took place in today's episode of World Today. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. And until we meet again in another episode of World Today and another team tomorrow, it's goodbye.